What is happening, guys? It's Kelly from Muddy Beers 4x4. Today I'm going to show you step by step how to set up a Ford 9-inch rear axle third member. So this third member came out of my buddy Nate's TJ. He blew out the ring gear, blowing all the teeth off of it right before our trip to King of the Hammers. So I know some of you out there might be a little apprehensive about setting up axles. So that's why I made this video, to hopefully some of you guys out there will be encouraged to buy your own tools and just play around with it. Do it yourself. It's going to save you a ton of money, because what is it, like probably now about $600 per axle. So 600, probably like $1,500 to do gears after everything's all said and done. And you'll be in at about $600 in tools. There's going to be a learning curve for sure, trying to get it set up properly the first time. I'm going to do my best to try and make videos of how to set up different types of axles. Whenever I come across them, I'll make a video of it and try and share the knowledge and experience that I have. Hopefully will help you guys out. That's the whole goal of these videos. The basics of this is setting your pinion bearing preload, setting your pinion depth, checking your pattern, your backlash, and then your final pattern check, and then torquing everything down. Now you are going to need this Yukon Gear install guide. This is the guide that I've been using for ever since I've been setting it up. It has all your specifications. There's probably other guides out there, but this is the one that I prefer. And it's going to have all of your information, all of your patterns. Just going to be able to tell, okay, if the pattern looks like this, it's too close. If it looks like this, it's too close. You need to move the pinion back out of the ring gear, or the pinion's too far away. It's going to show you all the different scenarios that your gears would look like in order to correct it. And I'm going to leave a link in the description right at the top. There is a PDF version or a downloadable online version of this, so I'll leave that in the link in the description. One of the biggest tools, the biggest investment here is our carrier, our bearing puller kit here. This one I got on eBay. I think it was like $260, something like that. Yukon sells this as well, or Randy's Ring and Pinion sells the exact same thing as this, and they're about $480 or something like that. You're going to need something to pull the bearings off. You could use your press, and you can buy individual clamshell things that you can set the bearing up in and press it out. But this thing is super slick, and I love this tool. Totally worth all the money that I spent on it. So you need hammers, soft face, regular hammers. You need an inch-pound torque wrench. This is just, like I said, this is super cheap. I don't remember how much it was, but to measure our preload on our bearings. And for the 9-inch and some other axles, you need a spanner wrench for tightening it down. Micrometer for measuring shims. Of course, you need a torque wrench, good torque wrench. And your dial indicator for measuring our backlash with the magnet and the whole setup. You need brass drifts, brass punches, so you don't mess up any of your stuff. I use this as a punch. It's an old center pin. I think it's a Chevy 10-bolt center pin that I use as a punch for shims. Probably won't be using it in this particular case. And also you do need a shop press. Like this one. This one's a 20-ton shop press from Harbor Freight. I think it was like $100, maybe $120, something like that. Good snap ring pliers, inside, outside, so we can get the snap rings out. And also a good bearing driver set. This one is just a Harbor Freight one. So you can use these on both sides. You install it on here, and you can press in, drive in, races at the flat side to install this into the housing, which goes right in there. Hear that? That bottomed out now. So I know that it's all the way in. You can see it down in there. I'm gonna get my snap ring pliers for the snap ring. There we go. Now it's installed, snap ring's in there, and that is done. So I'm going to show you how this tool works. So it's got the clamshells, and we pick which ones are the correct size. They come apart and they flip depending on the size. That's obviously too small. I'm going to flip it over. That is obviously too big. So typically it's this black one here. That is the correct size. Yep. And one great thing about this tool is you can remove the bearings from your carrier, from your pinion, and it doesn't ruin them if you do it properly. So it actually clamshells them and pulls them from the inner race, and it doesn't mess up the cage or the bearings. So this tool goes down into here, and this sits on top of this. See where I'm going with this? Clamshells go around. So there's some play in that. I can adjust this up so that it's snug on there. A little too snug. Okay, that's perfect. And then this goes over top. The locking ring, you can lock it down. There we go. And then this is a 36 millimeter. And you will need a good set of sockets and impact to do these as well. So, and it just impact it down and it will pull the bearing up. Didn't quite get it all the way off. Just give it a little bit tap, and it is off. And it didn't destroy it, and we could reuse it if we wanted to, but we're not going to because the kit comes with new bearings. So we can just repeat the same thing on the other side. So next up is the ring gear, and you're going to want to use permanent strength thread lock. Boop, boop, boop. Once they're all threaded in by hand, I know they're free and not cross-threaded or anything. My preferred method of torquing my ring gear bolts is in my press. So, show you how I do it is I just put it in, set it up in here, and just use a flat piece of metal, put it on top here, and just put a little bit of pressure on it. Enough to hold it into place. And this ring gear is 60 foot-pounds. So I already have it set up. You don't need to do a star pattern, but don't just go all the way around the first time. Just kind of stagger it across. Make sure you do that before you install your bearings, because the bearing is going to stick up a little bit above this edge possibly, and you don't want to mess up the races in the cage on your bearings. I use the inside races of old bearings to press new bearings on. So I take one of the old ones that was bad, cut it, take the cage off, and then use it to press on the new one. The cage actually sits up higher than the inner race, so you can't just press straight down on it. And even with the race on there, the cage sticks up above it. Next up, we got our pinion bearing. So these is actually a big bearing set up on this new housing here. So you can see this is the old one here, and this is the new one. You can see how much bigger this bearing is. Put the race on, and we're going to shove it upside down in my Harbor Freight press. Like I said, you will need a press. It is absolutely mandatory. You can throw a little oil or lubricant on it so it presses down a little bit if it's binding up at all. But it should be fairly easy to press on. And you'll know when it's all the way on because you can't do it anymore. Next on the list, going to put our bearing races into this pinion housing. So typically I prefer to get this races, anything that bearings, anything started by hand, like with the brass drift and everything, before I start with this, because this might get a little bit cockeyed when you're trying to pound it in. But once you get it started with this, then it goes a lot easier with these. Again, you know when it's bottomed out is you hit it and everything jumps off your workbench. Before I start putting this pinion together fully, I want to show you how the inside of this works. Once I put the bearing and the yoke and everything on there, it's going to be hard to tell what's going on inside. To understand it, so basically you got your pinion bearing. This is the old one. That's bad, right? And to set your pinion bearing preload, you're going to use the shim that comes with the kit. Actually, we have a different style where the shim goes in between here and you can shim it out. This style is just a sleeve, and you use these shims here to make it the thickness that you want. So basically the two bearings are touching each other on the inside of this, and the shims that you put in there basically move them apart from each other so that they're not as tight in these races. The order that you set this up in is really important. First thing you're going to do, pinion bearing preload. So we're going to put our shim in there, our bearing in there, and we're actually going to tighten it down with the yoke on there to figure out our pinion bearing preload. These nuts for the pinion nut here are technically one-time use only, and you might be able to see here that this little lip on the edge is kind of oval, so it locks it into place so it doesn't back out. So you can see this is the one that came off of it. This is the brand new one. It's got Loctite in there and a sealer in there to try and prevent oil and stuff from coming back up in through this nut. If you mock up the assembly and taking it on and off a couple of times, adjusting your shims, trying to get your preload correct, when you take it back off, it kind of messes the threads up a little bit, guys. I know from experience because I reset up a set of gears in my Jeep one time, and I was just buzzing this one on and off a bunch of times setting up my preload, and it messed up the threads on my pinion, and I couldn't get the nut on. Ended up getting a thread file, which I don't know if any of you guys, if you guys haven't seen this before, it's pretty cool. It allows you to kind of, doesn't cut threads, but if the thread is just a little bit, you know, messed up, you can put it on there and file the thread. And it has all the different thread pitches on both sides. And I ended up working the threads. It probably took me like 2 hours to get these threads because I didn't want to have to buy a brand new ring and pinion just for this. And it took me a few hours, and I got the threads good enough that I could reuse it, and it worked fine. So what you do is you cut the nut, you cut this whole top piece off. You can see on this one I cut the lip off, and use a ton of lubricant, anti-seize, any kind, whatever, WD-40, whatever you want. Use a ton of it because we're not locking it down yet. We're just testing it. And so you can use this and you can take it on and off a bunch of times, and it's not going to pinch those threads and cause problems in the future. So I'm just going to reuse what he has already set up. Hopefully it's going to be right. It might not be right, and I'm going to have to start all over again. Zero this out. But you always should start with something. Spray it down with, I got lubricant here. Is that 45? I do like that. So we'll just hit it down with the impact. Like I thought, because I measured this shim ahead of time, it's so tight. Can't even spin it. So gotta take it back off, and what I'll do is I will make that shim the same as this shim, and then we'll go from there. Like I said, this is why you want to modify that nut, because you're going to be taking it off a few times. Now that we know that we need more shims on this guy right here to separate these from the races so it's not so tight in there, I'm going to pull this off. And so I'm going to measure this original one, the one that came in the kit, that's the starting. And we are at, this is where the math comes in here, 12.33, and this one is 11.33. So we need a 1. So at least want to start with what this factory style shim is, and then we can back off after that. So 12.4, so we're 0.1 higher actually. 3, so super close. I was unable to get the pinion bearing preload where I wanted it with this aftermarket shim where you put the little shims inside of it. So I had to go back to the factory style shim, which I'm getting about 15 to 17 inch-pounds of resistance, which is exactly where I want it. unfortunately, with these really tall gears, these are 543s, this housing just cannot accommodate the big ring gear in here. So even in this aftermarket Yukon housing, I'm going to have to grind down this a notch in here. Be hard to see. So right here, I'm going to have to grind. I marked it, put it in, the ring gear in, and I marked it with my paint pen. I'm going to grind it out with my carbide bit, and we'll see how it goes. So we can use our spanner wrench now to tighten or loosen these up, so we can move the whole carrier left or right depending on to get our backlash the way we want it. These shims right here are our pinion depth shims. They're going to go between this pinion housing and the third member itself in order to adjust the depth of the pinion. I have no frame of reference of what the depth needs to be right now because I have no idea. I don't have the shim that came out of the other one, so I'm just going to guess and put one in, and then I'm going to go from there. Also, what's really important is right now I'm just testing assembly. I'm not putting the O-ring on this pinion housing. So once I'm all done and I know I have my pinion depth correct, I'm going to pull it back out, put the O-ring back in before I torque these bolts down. Okay, with these snug down, I can get my backlash kind of where I want it, and then I can check my pattern. You can already tell that's way too much, so I'm just getting everything in the ballpark to check my pattern. In order to adjust the backlash, I'm going to have to loosen up the non-ring gear side on your right, and I'm going to tighten up the left side, the ring gear side, to move the ring gear closer to the pinion, which is going to make the backlash lower. So loosen up one side, tighten up the other. That's what makes these 4 9-inches super easy to work on to adjust your backlash. Super simple, super easy. There's no shims. You don't have to press bearings on and off. It's just this loosen and tighten until you get it where you want it. Now that I have it where I feel I can actually check the backlash and the pattern, let's put it up on my vise and we will check it. A little trick, if you put some oil on your brush, it helps the paint spread and it gets you a way more consistent pattern. This pattern looks really good. I am not actually going to have to change out my pinion shims at all. It's not too deep and it's not too shallow in the teeth, so I'm not going to have to change my shims, which is awesome. I just happened to get it the first try. But consult this guide and look at the pattern and see if it's too deep or too shallow, and adjust your pinion shims, the pinion housing shims, accordingly to move it in or out. So now let's go on and check the backlash. So I got my dial indicator set up and I'm checking the backlash, and I got 5. So I need at least 10. So I'm going to use my spanner wrench and adjust these out to tighten this side and loosen the other side just a touch to give myself my 10. Okay, now I have my backlash set at to about 10, and my locking rings right here are bolted on, and I'm going to torque the caps to 80 foot-pounds. The factory case is supposed to be 60, but these are bigger, heavier duty bolts, so I'm going to torque them to 80, and then I'm going to recheck with the pattern on my ring gear, and should be good to go, I'm hoping. And on tightening these, the carrier, you can't really over tighten the bearings. Like, you can't over preload carrier bearings. It's not, you just can't do it. It's not going to happen. So tighten down as much as you want, and they are going to be fine. If you're setting up a used setup, you want to load it up, because now since everything's brand new, everything's pretty tight and snug. So you can take a towel, twist it and wrap it around to add some load to it. It actually makes a difference on your pattern. In this case, you could wrap it around the spool and twist it and give it some load. This case, everything's brand new and it's pretty snug already, so I'm not going to be doing that. This is going to be an acceptable pattern here. On the drive side, looks pretty good, and then on the coast side as well. So I'm going to run this. So I've torqued these down to 40 foot-pounds all the way around. Now, some of you out there might have noticed that this pinion nut is not correct. It is actually sticking out slightly where the locking part of the nut is not actually engaged on the pinion threads, which is a problem because it will back out and your pinion will come loose and you'll blow up your rear end. So this is a problem. I'm addressing it. There's two ways to address it. One, there is a special pinion nut that is shallower. Because this setup is a big bearing, I think they call it the Daytona upgrade, the bearings are bigger, which moves everything out so that pinion nut and the yoke stick out a little bit farther, and it doesn't allow that factory style nut to engage all the way. So you can go online and get that. It's a thinner nut and it will engage all the way on. Or what we did when I got to Nate's house and we were staring at it trying to figure out what we were going to do, basically we had to put this thing in like within less than 24 hours, like that day, because we were leaving for King of the Hammers. What we did is this is not a 9-inch yoke, I think it's a Dana 30, but what we did is we ended up shaving off the amount that we needed off of the pinion yoke. So we ground down, cut off this pinion yoke and used a dial indicator to make sure that it was as square as possible. And that's how we got the pinion nut to actually drop down and engage the way we needed it to. And I have to say that we wheeled the whole time at King of the Hammers and we had no problems with the pinion nut or the Ford 9-inch. So it actually worked. Make sure if you're doing the big bearing that you go ahead before you start and order that pinion nut. Thanks guys for watching. Make sure as always you like, subscribe, tell your friends. Check us out on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and we will see you guys on the trail.